The first time I saw my grandmother's hands shake uncontrollably, I thought it was just her age catching up. The teacup rattled against the saucer as she tried to set it down, and Margaret, her live-in caregiver, rushed over with that same concerned smile she always wore. "Oh, Eleanor, let me help you with that," she cooed, steadying Grandma's trembling fingers. I was 17 then, visiting for spring break, and something about the way Margaret's eyes flickered when she thought no one was watching made my skin crawl. My name is Connor Fitzgerald. I just turned 18, and I thought becoming an adult meant getting ready for college, maybe finally asking Sarah Chen from calculus class on a real date. Instead, it meant discovering that the woman we'd trusted with my grandmother's life had been systematically destroying it for money. If you've ever had that gut feeling that someone you're supposed to trust is actually a monster in disguise, hit that subscribe button and let me know where you're watching from, because what I'm about to tell you might save someone's life. Grandma Eleanor wasn't just any grandmother. After my parents died in a car accident when I was 7, she raised me single-handedly. She was 72 then, already a widow, but she never complained. She sold her retirement condo in Florida and moved back to Cincinnati to take care of me. For 10 years, she was my rock. Sharp as a tack, could still beat me at chess, and made the best apple pie in Ohio. That's why when she started getting sick 2 years ago, I knew we needed help. Margaret Holbrook came highly recommended. She had glowing references, 15 years of experience, and a warm personality that immediately put us at ease. She was in her 40s, divorced, with grown kids of her own. During the interview, she talked about how caring for the elderly was her calling, how she'd nursed her own mother through Alzheimer's. Grandma liked her immediately. The agency had done background checks, verified her certifications. Everything checked out perfectly. For the first few months, Margaret seemed like a godsend. She moved into our guest room, cooked healthy meals, managed Grandma's medications, drove her to doctor's appointments. She even helped me with college applications, proofread my essays. I started calling her Aunt Maggie. When Grandma's health began declining, first the tremors, then the confusion, the weakness, Margaret was always there, documenting symptoms for the doctors, adjusting medications, holding Grandma's hand through the bad days. The decline was gradual enough that everyone attributed it to natural aging. Grandma was 82 after all. The doctors ran tests, adjusted medications, but nothing seemed to help. She went from walking with a cane to needing a walker, then a wheelchair. Her sharp mind grew foggy. Some days she didn't recognize me. Margaret would pat my shoulders sympathetically, tell me this was normal, that we were doing everything we could. But there were things that didn't add up. Grandma always seemed worse after Margaret's days off when the relief caregiver came. She'd have more energy, better appetites, clearer thoughts. Then Margaret would return, and within days, Grandma would spiral again. I mentioned it once to Margaret, and she explained it away. Routine disruption, she said. The elderly needed consistency. The real red flag came during my senior year of high school. I was working on a biology project about toxicology when I noticed something strange. Grandma's symptoms, the specific type of tremor, the pattern of confusion, the digestive issues, they matched almost perfectly with chronic low-level poisoning. Not enough to kill quickly, but enough to cause gradual organ failure. I told myself I was being paranoid, watching too many crime documentaries. Margaret loved Grandma. She cried real tears when Grandma had bad days. Then I overheard the phone call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday night in March, 3 months before my 18th birthday. I come home early from basketball practice with a twisted ankle. Margaret didn't hear me come in. She was in the kitchen speaking quietly but urgently into her phone. 6 more months maximum, she was saying. The doctor confirmed it today. Stage 4 kidney failure. No suspicion at all. Natural progression for someone her age. There was a pause. The life insurance is still active, $500,000 plus the house. I'm the beneficiary for my caregiving services. Remember? We discussed this. My blood turned to ice. I stood frozen in the hallway, my mind racing. Life insurance? Beneficiary? I knew Grandma had updated her will recently. Margaret had helped her, said it was important to have everything in order. But making Margaret a beneficiary? I limped silently to my room and immediately started researching. What I found made me sick. There was no stage 4 kidney failure in Grandma's medical records. I had access to her patient portal. The doctor hadn't confirmed anything that day. Grandma hadn't even had an appointment. But more disturbing was what I found when I deep dived into Margaret Holbrook herself. The real Margaret Holbrook had died 3 years ago in Portland. The woman living in our house, caring for my grandmother, was someone else entirely. My hands shook as I discovered more. 3 elderly patients in 3 different states over the past decade, all dying within 2 years of her becoming their caregiver, all leaving her substantial amounts in their wills, all dying from natural causes related to organ failure. Her real name was Patricia Vance, and she was a serial killer hiding in plain sight. I couldn't go to the police yet. I needed proof. One accusation from a teenager against a beloved caregiver wouldn't be enough, so I started documenting everything. I installed a hidden camera in the kitchen, another in Grandma's room. I started marking Grandma's medication bottles with invisible ink to track if they were being tampered with. I kept detailed logs of Grandma's symptoms, correlating them with Margaret's shift patterns. What I captured on camera made me vomit. Every morning, Margaret would prepare Grandma's breakfast, oatmeal with fresh fruit exactly as the nutritionist recommended, but before serving it, she'd add drops from a small bottle she kept hidden in her apron pocket. The same bottle appeared when she prepared Grandma's evening tea. I researched the symptoms of various poisons until I found a match. Ethylene glycol, the active ingredient in antifreeze. In small doses, it causes exactly the symptoms Grandma was experiencing. It's sweet-tasting, undetectable in food, and causes gradual kidney failure that appears natural in elderly patients. I wanted to confront her immediately, to scream, to call 911, but I knew I needed ironclad evidence. Patricia Vance had gotten away with this 3 times before. She wouldn't go down easily. I started switching Grandma's meals when Margaret wasn't looking. I'd dump the poisoned oatmeal and replace it with fresh from a batch I'd made secretly. I'd swap her tea. It was exhausting trying to protect Grandma while maintaining the pretense that I suspected nothing. But within a week, Grandma's tremors decreased. Her mind became clearer. Margaret noticed, of course. She increased the doses. "Your grandmother had a bad night," she'd tell me, her face a mask of concern. I've had to adjust her medications. The doctor approved it over the phone. There was no doctor's approval. I'd checked. The game of cat and mouse continued for weeks. I was barely sleeping. My grades were slipping, but I couldn't stop. I reached out to the families of Margaret's, Patricia's, previous victims. 2 wouldn't talk to me, but one, a man named Robert in Phoenix, broke down crying on the phone. "I knew something was wrong," he sobbed. "My mother was healthy. Then suddenly she wasn't. But Patricia was so kind, so caring. She held my hand at the funeral. She cried with me. Then I found out she'd inherited $200,000 in my mother's jewelry collection. By then, she'd disappeared. Robert sent me documents, medical records, anything he had. The pattern was identical. The symptoms, the timeline, the inheritance. We had 3 cases of the same MO, but we needed to catch her in the act. My 18th birthday was approaching. June 15th. Margaret had mentioned several times how sad it would be. My first birthday as a legal adult, possibly Grandma's last birthday with me. She'd suggested we plan something special, maybe a small family gathering. The way she said last birthday made my skin crawl. I knew I couldn't wait much longer. Grandma was getting weaker despite my interventions. Margaret had started locking her door at night, making it harder for me to switch the meals. She'd also increased her control, suggesting that maybe Grandma needed hospice care, that perhaps it would be better if I focused on graduating high school rather than worrying about caregiving. 2 weeks before my birthday, I made a decision. I contacted a private investigator, James Morrison, a former cop who specialized in elder abuse cases. I showed him everything. The videos, the documentation, the pattern of deaths. His face went pale as he reviewed the evidence. "This is enough for a warrant," he said, "but we need to be strategic. If she suspects anything, she might accelerate her timeline or disappear." We developed a plan. James would contact the FBI. This was now an interstate case with multiple victims. They would coordinate with local police, but everything had to happen simultaneously. We couldn't risk Patricia fleeing or destroying evidence. The week before my birthday, Patricia made her move. She came to me with legal documents, her face a picture of maternal concern. "Connor, honey, your grandmother wants to make sure you're taken care of. She's setting up a trust for your college education, but she needs you to sign some papers as you're about to be 18. The papers weren't for a college trust. Buried in the legal jargon was a clause that would give Patricia full power of attorney over Grandma's estate, including the ability to change beneficiaries on all insurance policies. If I signed, she could cut me out entirely, take everything. "I need to read these more carefully," I said, keeping my voice steady. Patricia's mask slipped for just a moment. "Of course, dear, but your grandmother doesn't have much time. The doctors say weeks, maybe days. We should handle this quickly." There were no doctors saying that. Grandma's actual physician, Dr. Kumar, had told me privately that aside from the mysterious symptoms, Grandma's heart was strong. She could live years if we could figure out what was causing her illness. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I was in the kitchen at 2 a.m., unable to sleep, when Patricia appeared in the doorway. She wasn't wearing her usual caring smile. "You know," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. My heart pounded, but I held her gaze. "I know everything, Patricia." She stepped into the kitchen, closing the door behind her. "You're a smart boy, Connor, smarter than the others. But you're also young, naive. You think the world is black and white, good and evil." "You're poisoning her," I said flatly. "You've killed at least 3 others." Patricia laughed to sound like breaking glass. "Proving that would be quite difficult. I'm very good at what I do." "And your grandmother? She's old, sick. No one would question it if she passed tonight. Heart failure, they'd say. Tragic, but expected." "The FBI might question it," I said, my phone recording in my pocket. "They're very interested in Patricia Vance." Her face went white. For the first time I saw fear in her eyes. "You little..." She stepped toward me, then stopped. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I have connections, resources. You're just a kid. A kid who's been documenting everything for 3 months. Videos of you poisoning her food, records of your previous victims. Robert from Phoenix sends his regards, by the way." Patricia's composure cracked completely. "You think you've won? Your grandmother will be dead before any investigation concludes. And you? Accidents happen to teenage boys all the time. Car crashes, drownings, overdoses. Are you threatening me?" I asked clearly, making sure my phone caught every word. She realized her mistake too late. "I should have increased the dose months ago," she snarled. "Should have finished this before you got suspicious." "But you got greedy," I said. "You wanted it to look natural, to collect everything without suspicion. You've been doing this for so long, you thought you were untouchable." Patricia lunged for my phone, but I was younger, faster. I dodged, ran for the front door, and found it already opening. James Morrison stood there with 4 FBI agents and local police. "Patricia Vance," the lead agent said. "You're under arrest for murder, attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent." Patricia tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. As they handcuffed her, she looked at me with pure hatred. "Your grandmother will die without me. You've killed her." "No," I said. "I saved her." The next hours were a blur. Paramedics rushed Grandma to the hospital, where a toxicology team began treatment for ethylene glycol poisoning. The FBI searched Patricia's room, finding not just the poison, but detailed notes on her victims, insurance documents, and nearly $3 million in offshore accounts, blood money from over a decade of murders. My birthday came 3 days later, June 15th. I spent it in the hospital with Grandma, who was conscious and improving rapidly. The doctor said that catching the poisoning when we did had saved her life. With proper treatment, she would make a full recovery. "Connor," Grandma said, holding my hand with fingers that no longer shook. "You saved my life. How did you know?" I told her everything. She cried, not just from the betrayal, but from guilt that she had brought this monster into our home. I reminded her that Patricia was a professional predator who'd fooled dozens of people, including agencies and background check companies. The trial made national news. Patricia Vance was linked to 7 murders across 5 states. She'd been operating for 15 years, targeting wealthy elderly patients, gaining their trust, and slowly poisoning them while ensuring she was named in their wills. She'd stolen an estimated $8 million in countless family heirlooms. The FBI called it one of the most extensive serial killing sprees targeting the elderly in U.S. history. Patricia was convicted on all counts. 7 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder, plus fraud and identity theft charges. She received 7 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. During sentencing, she showed no remorse, only complaining that her methods had been artistic, and we were too stupid to appreciate her genius. Robert from Phoenix flew in for the trial. He hugged me afterward, tears streaming down his face. "You did what I couldn't," he said. "You stopped her. You're a hero." I didn't feel like a hero. I felt tired, angry, and sad. We'd trusted Patricia. I'd called her Aunt Maggie. She'd helped with my homework while slowly murdering the woman who raised me. The investigation revealed how Patricia operated. She'd studied chemistry in college before dropping out. She'd worked briefly in a nursing home where she'd learned about elder care and, more importantly, how to exploit the system. She created fake identities using deceased caregivers' credentials, moved from state to state, and targeted wealthy elderly people with distant or busy families. She was intelligent, patient, and completely sociopathic. The FBI profiler said she enjoyed the process, the trust, the control, the slow deteriorations of her victims. The money was important, but the power was what she really craved. She liked being needed, depended upon, even as she destroyed the very people who trusted her. Grandma's recovery was remarkable. Within 2 months, she was walking again. Her mind, freed from the constant poisoning, returned to its former sharpness. She beat me at chess for the first time in a year. We sold the house, too many bad memories, and moved to a smaller place closer to the college I'd be attending. The experience changed my career path. I'd planned to study engineering, but I switched to criminal justice with a focus on elder abuse prevention. I wanted to stop other Patricia Vances before they could destroy families like ours. Grandma established a foundation in the victims' names, funding background check improvements for caregiving agencies and supporting families affected by elder abuse. She testified before Congress about the need for better oversight of in-home caregivers. At 83, she became an unexpected activist, her story inspiring policy changes in 12 states. Sarah Chen, the girl from calculus class, asked me to prom. She'd followed the trial in the news. "You saved your grandmother," she said. "That's the bravest thing I've ever heard." We've been dating for 6 months now. She's studying pre-med, wants to specialize in geriatric medicine. She says my story inspired her to protect the elderly. The trauma lingers. I still check Grandma's food sometimes, an involuntary reflex. I have nightmares about finding her dead, about being too late. I see a therapist who specializes in trauma from family betrayal. It helps, but trust doesn't come easily anymore. Last week, Grandma hired a new caregiver, a young woman named Jennifer who comes highly recommended. I ran 3 separate background checks, interviewed her previous employers personally, and installed security cameras throughout the house. Jennifer understands why. She says she would do the same. "The Patricia Vances of the world make it harder for honest caregivers," she told me. "What you did wasn't just brave, it was necessary." Grandma is 83 now, truly aging but naturally. Her doctor says she could live another decade, maybe more. She jokes that she's too stubborn to die, that she has to see me graduate college, get married, have kids. I believe her. Eleanor Fitzgerald is a survivor. The letters from prison started last month. Patricia writes to me, long, rambling manifestos about how I ruined her life's work, how I don't understand the mercy she was showing her victims. I don't read them anymore. I give them directly to the FBI in case she confesses to other crimes. But one line from her first letter stays with me. "You think you won, but I taught you something valuable. Never trust anyone completely." She's wrong. She didn't teach me not to trust. She taught me to verify, to listen to my instincts, to protect those I love. She taught me that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like kind middle-aged women who make excellent chicken soup and help with algebra homework. The real lesson is different. Evil exists, often hiding behind a caring smile. But good exists too. In teenage boys who refuse to let their grandmothers die, in FBI agents who take elder abuse seriously, in prosecutors who fight for justice, for victims who can't fight for themselves. I'm 18 years old, a college freshman studying criminal justice. My grandmother's alive, healthy, and just beat me at chess again yesterday. Patricia Vance is in prison for the rest of her life. 7 families have closure, and somewhere out there potential victims are safe because one teenager refused to ignore his instincts. If you're watching this and something feels wrong about a caregiver, a family friend, anyone with access to vulnerable people in your life, trust your gut. Document everything. Don't be afraid to speak up. I almost waited too long, almost lost the woman who raised me because I doubted myself. The elderly are often perfect victims, isolated, dependent, their deaths expected. Predators like Patricia count on that. They count on families being too busy, too trusting, too afraid to ask questions. Don't let them. Grandma likes to say, "I'm her hero." But the truth is, she saved herself by raising me to question things, to think critically, to fight for what's right even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Patricia Vance thought she'd found the perfect victim in Eleanor Fitzgerald. Instead, she found the grandmother of someone who would bring her down. She underestimated the power of family, real family, not the fake concern. She performed, but the genuine love that makes you stay up all night switching poison meals, that makes you risk everything to save someone you love. My name is Connor Fitzgerald. I'm 18 years old, and I thought becoming an adult meant freedom and independence. Instead, it meant learning that sometimes the people who are supposed to care for your loved ones are the ones hurting them. It meant discovering that I was capable of more courage than I knew I had. It meant understanding that becoming an adult isn't about age. It's about stepping up when someone you love needs protection, even if the threat comes from inside your own home. Grandma and I have dinner together every Sunday now. She makes her famous apple pie, and I triple-check all the ingredients, a habit I'll probably never shake. We play chess, and she tells me stories about my parents, about her life before all of this. We don't talk about Patricia much anymore. That chapter is closed. But sometimes, late at night, I think about all the elderly people out there with caregivers they trust, and I wonder how many Patricia Vances are still operating. That's why I'm sharing this story. Not for sympathy or praise, but as a warning and a call to action. Check on your elderly relatives, ask questions about their caregivers, notice changes in health, behavior, or finances. Don't assume decline is natural just because someone is old, and if something feels wrong, investigate. You might save a life. Patricia Vance is serving 7 life sentences, but she was just one predator. The FBI estimates there are hundreds, maybe thousands of similar cases that go undetected. Elder abuse is a silent epidemic, and poisoning is just one method. Financial exploitation, physical abuse, neglect, they're all happening behind closed doors in homes across America. My grandmother is one of the lucky ones. She survived. She's here to see me graduate, to meet her future great-grandchildren, to continue beating me at chess. But 7 other families weren't so fortunate. 7 elderly people died thinking someone who cared for them was helping, never knowing they were being murdered for money. Their names were Margaret Thompson, James Muller, Dorothy Chen, Harold Washington, Betty Martinez, George Adamson, and Ruth Cohen. They were parents, grandparents, veterans, teachers, nurses. They had stories, families, dreams for their remaining years. Patricia Vance stole all of that for money she'll never get to spend. I think about them often. These people I never met but feel connected to. In stopping Patricia, I got justice for them too. It doesn't bring them back, but their deaths weren't in vain. They led me to the truth that saved my grandmother. Tomorrow I have an exam in my criminal psychology class. We're studying serial killers, their patterns and motivations. My professor doesn't know that I've lived through a case study, that I've sat across from a serial killer at breakfast for 2 years, that I've watched her prepare poison with the same hands that tucked me in when I had the flu. Sometimes my classmates debate whether serial killers are born or made, whether they're evil or sick. I don't participate in those discussions. I know what I saw in Patricia's eyes that night in the kitchen. Not illness, but calculation. Not compulsion, but choice. She chose to kill for money and control. She chose to betray the trust of vulnerable people. She chose the evil. But I chose to. I chose to fight back, to seek justice, to save my grandmother. We all have choices every day. Most aren't as dramatic as stopping a serial killer, but they matter. The choice to check on an elderly neighbor, to question an unusual symptoms, to report suspected abuse. These choices save lives. My grandmother turns 84 next month. She's planning a big party, says she wants to celebrate every birthday like it's her last and her first all at once. She's invited Jennifer, our new caregiver, who has become like real family. She's invited James Morrison, the private investigator who helped save her life. She's even invited Dr. Kumar and the FBI agents who worked our case. I want to surround myself with good people, she says. People who protect others, who fight for what's right. She doesn't say it, but I know she's also celebrating what we survived, what we overcame. Every birthday now is a victory, a year Patricia Vance didn't steal from her. As for me, I'm learning to trust again, slowly. I'm learning that Patricia was an anomaly, that most people who care for the elderly do so with genuine compassion. I'm learning that vigilance and paranoia aren't the same thing, that you can be protective without being paralyzed by fear. But I'll never forget the lesson written in those 7 victims' deaths and my grandmother's near miss. Evil sometimes comes disguised as kindness, and the most vulnerable among us need protectors. If my story helps even one family avoid what we went through, if it saves even one elderly person from a predator disguised as a caregiver, then sharing this painful chapter of our lives is worth it. My name is Connor Fitzgerald, and although I'm 18 years old, a survivor of secondary trauma, a grandson who refused to lose his grandmother to a monster in Scrubs, this is our story, mine and Grandma Eleanor's, but it's also a warning and a promise. A warning that predators like Patricia Vance exist, and a promise that they can be stopped. Watch over your elderly loved ones. Trust but verify. And never, ever ignore that voice in your head that says something's wrong. That voice saved my grandmother's life. It might save someone you love too. End or brain